have Q&A back, but we know that GSA intends to release something this week. So hopefully we'll have a little bit better guidance here soon. But in the meantime, some things we can cover. So we'll go through our admin updates here, any updates to the opportunity, kind of our weekly topic. I just want to recap some of the frequently asked questions that we've been getting. And then we can stop the recording and just have a Q&A session. So if there's anything that's specific to your situation that you want to talk through, this is your time. This is the benefit of this smaller exclusive webinar. You've got me and Ada's on the line as well. So if you have questions or if there's something that you're not too sure how to handle, we can dive into that specific situation at the end of the call. So moving forward, obviously we're staying tuned for those Q&A shreds. I did want to point out I've updated the Symphony upload and file tracker on the information hub. So it's listed as August update, and you're going to see us start to update some of these other artifacts once we get the amendment from GSA if it's warranted. Because we do expect some better guidance around some of the credit areas and how to account for things and how to tag things or what's going to suffice as evidence. But just diving into the importance of having something like this file tracker, you can build one that works for you. This is a recommended starting point. And what I want to draw your attention to is there's a section in this document that's all about the project information. And this might seem a little bit data intensive, but it can be really helpful to have your project summary documented with not just the value that you're going to put in the field, but the location of the file that's substantiating it, right? So this is designed to mirror Symphony, where you're going to put your period of performance in, for example, right? And by the way, if you've noticed on the JP3 form, they just asked for a month and a year for the start and the end dates. But when you actually go into Symphony to populate your project information, you have to pick a specific date, because those dates that you put in are what Symphony is using to calculate your total period of performance in days. And that's what gets divided into the total contract value that you indicate. So writing down, are we using March 31st? Is it March 29th? What does the FPDS record say? What does the contract award form say? And which one do we want to use as our evidence? And kind of getting that project documentation sorted out ahead of time so that when you go to QC, you know that you've entered things correctly and that things match. And if you have cited, for example, the JP3 for your period of performance, because maybe you have one of those tricky situations where there's been multiple mods and the start date is one thing and the end date's on a different document. Whatever your file source is, you can put that in here, and then that's the file that you need to tag when you actually upload the project into Symphony. So on the form, you'll see this if you download it from our information hub. Anything in blue annotates that it's a drop-down field in Symphony. I don't know if any of this is going to change, but this is what it is today. Not all of these fields are mandatory, so this is just a generic template that you can tailor based on your proposal, right? So if you're not in one of the domains where location or OCONUS credit counts for you, you don't need to worry about filling that out. Same thing with FTE counts. If you're not using FTE counts to substantiate your scale, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. But this is just your starting point that you can tailor as you see fit. And as a recommendation, right, a very strong recommendation, you should have, under where it says project documentation and file type, you should kind of have an equivalent of all of these things, right? Like every project is either going to need an FPDS record or an award document. You're going to need a statement of work or PWS in most cases, unless it's classified, basically, right? And you're not using it to substantiate any additional credits. So this is just to kind of help keep you honest and think through, okay, do I have something that substantiates past performance for this? Do I have something that describes the work? Did I need a JP3? Have I uploaded all of those things? And what's the basic project information? So there's many more sections to this file upload tracker, including the certification areas, and then financial resources and all the supporting documents. So it's organized by volume, and it matches what Symphony has in terms of how information is grouped. But we highly recommend you take this extra step and document something outside of Symphony, because the other thing you can use this for is when you're doing your internal company reviews, and it's for the president of the company, or it's for somebody who maybe hasn't necessarily been involved in the bid but wants to see where your company's at and what you're scoring, you can give them this tracker and say, okay, here's how we know we've uploaded everything. So when we get to the integrated experience, I want to see 3 documents that substantiate these kind of things. And you'll be able to just run them through this. And because otherwise you're just looking at Symphony and you don't know if it's comprehensive or not. So we are encouraging the use of a tool like this. It doesn't have to be this one exactly. Find something that works for you, but you can use this as a starting point. In terms of opportunity updates, this is all TBD, right? Like we know that the pricing module is supposed to be open this week. They're doing a webinar about it tomorrow. So hopefully sometime between tonight and tomorrow morning, they're going to make that functional. Q&A is expected soon. GSA has stated that they will be answering questions till the end of the month because they're doing this rolling release, right? So what I have heard from industry sources is that they think the first 3,000 questions or so are going to be answered this week. It still leaves 1,500 that need to get answered. But if you ask Tiffany Hickson, who's in the GSA office, they're not real keen on extending this beyond what they need to. So I think it's likely that we're going to see some extension because we're under a month to go now, basically, and we still don't have any Q&A. We know there's going to be updates to some of the forms. We know they're changing the price and cost template or the rates. We're not sure which one, or if it's both, right? Because they had that confusing language 2 weeks ago. But just knowing that they're going to be putting out changes that drives some adjustments to project eligibility and tagging and preparation, I would expect to see at least a little bit of an extension, but just know that the appetite is not there to stretch this many more months. I already mentioned that tomorrow we're going to have a bonus session, and the big catalyst for that is we tried and are going to dial into GSA's webinar that they're doing in the morning. That walks through the Symphony submission and some of the nuances of that portal. I think we've probably covered a lot of that one-on-one with the teams, but we just want to make sure that there's no surprises in there for us, that we can advise you accordingly. And then we'll check out this due date and we'll see if that holds. So definitely much more to follow here. No changes to this slide, except I've added October and November just in case we need to be prepared. But like I said, as of right now, the due date is still September 13th. So since we're about a month out, our best guidance is to proceed as though there's not going to be an extension. GSA has expressly said that they're going to permit, even if they change the JP3 or the JP6, they're going to permit whatever we get signed and validated now. It doesn't mean that you can't redo it, but in case you were worried about that, they've confirmed that yes, they will accept the current versions. And then there's a whole lot of just supporting documentation that you could be getting knocked out of the way, right? So if you're in the category where you're working with a Trident SME, but you haven't sent us anything to review yet from these other supporting volumes. So by that, I mean your uncompensated overtime policy, your professional employee compensation plan. Sooner is better than later on those. I know everybody's going to be digesting changes from the amendment and from Q&A, but we can at least get you an 80% solution or review of those other documents and let you know if there's things that you need to work on or tweak. In most cases, what we've seen come from our clients, they're not big changes that are necessary, but there are little compliance issues or things for clarification that you can work on now. So there's still lots of work that can be happening even while we're in this waiting period, as frustrating as it might be. So like I said, worst case, you can get your proposal sort of tidied up, uploaded. You're not going to submit, right, until much closer to whatever the actual due date is. But if your projects aren't changing, or if you're pretty sure that you're not going to have anything fall out of contention and you know what you're doing with tagging, and especially if you're using prime federal work and you have FPDS records and you've already got your CFARs and everything is just sort of straightforward when it comes to your evidence, you can upload that now and put your proposal on the shelf and then just make minor adjustments as we go rather than trying to put off everything to the last minute. So don't underestimate the labor required with actually getting this uploaded into Symphony. What we're telling or how we're encouraging people to think about this is, since there's no narrative, right? We're not going for an outstanding. We're not trying to explain our way onto this contract because it's all evidence-based. Step one is making sure that we have the evidence and that it gets us to the points that we need. Step two is making sure that things are entered correctly in the portal so that we get the credit for the evidence that we have. So it really is sort of a phased approach to this proposal submission. And if you haven't started thinking about that upload and that organization, this is the time to be doing that. So hopefully later this week, we'll have a little bit better guidance, especially around things like collections of task orders, or if you're using subcontractor experience. This is one of the real weird nuances in this instance of Symphony. If you notice, it'll ask you if you were a subcontractor, and other than small business subcontractor or small business subcontractor to a federal customer, to a federal prime, but there's no additional credits for that. So it's kind of a weird distinction between subcontracting work and subcontracting work on a federal prime contract. So we just expect that'll be one of the things that they clarify, which project type applies. Are you selecting the right one? And making sure that everything is organized from the get-go with those. So much more to follow here, but we'll publish a revised calendar once we know if there's going to be an extension and kind of what those next gate milestone reviews should look like. I will just say, please do allow 24 to 48 hours. If you pass something to Dryden, give us a day or two to look it over, digest it, think about it, and get you our feedback. We're turning things as quickly as we can. But yeah, there is just a little bit of a lag, or like I said, just give us the space to review it and digest it, because some of you have very interesting situations that are not necessarily covered by the RFP or the RFP directly yet. So we want to think through what our options are and what some alternative courses of actions are should we need them. Okay, so some issues that have come up, not issues, some questions that keep coming up that I wanted to make sure we cover this week. So this is a really common one. We prep the JP3s, right? We prep the JP6. We send them to our client. They come back signed, and someone has changed the end date, or someone has changed the value, or for some reason, something other than what we put on the form is off. And, the question we're getting is that a problem? And the question, or the answer is, it shouldn't be, right? It all depends on what you're using to substantiate your claim, and what you put in Symphony as the reference that GSA could look at to validate what you're claiming. So, for example, if your dates are off, or if your total contract value between your JP3, which is your project verification form, and your JP6 doesn't match, you're only going to put in one value in Symphony when you go to build your company's project, right? And you're going to have to tell Symphony, where do you want me to look for this information? And in most cases, you're going to have one file, especially for this binary project data. For integrated experience, where you're trying to show multiple LCATs or multiple functional areas, you might have a couple different documents that you need to use. Excuse me. But for something like total contract value, it's probably going to be a smaller set of references. So what GSA is not doing is necessarily going to every single one of your documents and saying, well, wait a second, the value on the base contract was $5 million and the value on mod 5 was $7 million. Like, that's not in anybody's best use of time, right? Because the modification may have increased the ceiling. So what we care about is what's the most recent, most true, most accurate number that we're trying to cite, and what's the reference for that. So bottom line, just because it says something on the form doesn't mean that that's what GSA is going to take at face value, unless you tell them that is your certified evidence reference justification point that they should be using to grade your evidence, basically. Another question that's come up a lot is, should I tag credit elements in multiple places? So if multiple places list 5 or more LCATs, by places, I mean places in the document or different documents, right? If you have an invoice and you have a statement of work, should I tag both things? And the answer is no. And this actually comes from GSA's FAQ that they released when they put out Amendment 1. They don't want to go find multiple POP tags. They don't need to see multiple instances of functional areas. And this ties into the next question: should I tag backup or tag backup evidence, right? If I need 3 functional areas, should I actually tag 4 or should I tag 5 just to be safe? The answer to both of these is no. Pick your evidence that's going to substantiate what you need it to, that's as straightforward to understand as possible, right? Without you in the room to explain it, so the GSA comes to the same conclusion, but don't bog them down with 17 different examples of how you meet the requirement. Technically, 1 is enough, right? As long as it matches the list of what's permissible to use as evidence as annotated in the RFP. This should make your lives easier too. So there's no magic number for what a right number of tags is, because it's going to be so highly contingent on what your statement of work looks like, or what your contract award form looks like, and how clean the story is. But sorry. My throat gets so dry on these webinars, even though it's such a friendly audience. Can't explain it. but you don't need extra. If you open up your PDF and you look in the comments tab, right? If you expand that view and you see that you've got 48 tags in one document, that might be too many. I can't tell you what the right number is, but if you pass the document to your Trident SME, they can tell you, yeah, you've sufficiently covered this requirement, or no, we need to add a few more tags. But in most cases, we're going to say, I think you have too many. Let's streamline this a little bit. Does the color of your tag or really your highlight matter? The answer here is no. Like, you could color code things if you want. You can make things blue. You can use yellow. We had a really good instance, for example, sometimes we get documents where the prime, if they're issuing a mod, or the government, if they're issuing a modification, will highlight things they'll highlight the change in the document already using a highlight that's yellow, right? So would that be confusing? It's not a problem if you use the same color to highlight as what the government has used, because of what Symphony is scanning for when it's looking for the highlights and the tags in a PDF, or in a Word document, because you can do it like that too. And there will be a human looking at things. So they're going to look at where your tag is, where your comment is, and determine from there the information that applies. So if there's extra highlighting in your document because the government or the prime did something extra, you don't have to worry about that. And then, can you explain other scoring elements in the 1,000-character narrative on the JP3? It's really not what that block is for. That 1,000-character narrative is really to talk about relevance to the domain. So the project's relevance to the domain that you're claiming relevance in. It's not to talk about whether it was a cost reimbursable contract or not. It's not to cite how many teammates you used and what their names were. It's really just to talk about how the services that you delivered in the course of that project align with what kinds of functional services GSA has defined for the different domains or functional areas. And actually, it's just domains, because functional areas is a separate thing, even though domains and functional areas are interchangeable as terms. For integrated experience credit, we're talking about functional areas, and the important distinction there is that that includes more areas than just the main domain. So we could talk about the IT services functional area. We could talk about the public affairs functional area, or the business case management functional area, right? Because all of those are future, possibly planned areas that might become domains, but they're not domains today. So when the GSA says domains, they're talking about the primary 8, M&A, T&E, Intel services, those core domains that we're working with today. And functional areas is a broader term than what domain is. So just want to point that out. One thing I want to go back to is, if you're tagging credit elements multiple places, or if you're tagging backups, sometimes you're doing that because you're trying to leave a trail of breadcrumbs, right? You're trying to say, look, I'm highlighting this because it's tag 1 of 3, and you need to evaluate all 3 of these tags to get the big picture. That's okay. And in those cases, what we do recommend you can do one of 2 things. One would be to number your tags and say, this is tag 1 of 3 related to this area, right? Because you can add text there. Whether or not somebody reads it, GSA is going to say they're not going to read what's in the tags, but let's be honest, it's going to be a human looking at that at some point. So if they know that they need to go to the next tag, it can't hurt to include that information. So you can number, tag 1 of 2, 2 of 2, or you could even point them and say, this combined with section 5 in file whatever, right? If it's an additional PWS addendum, or if it's an invoice or something like that that helps connect the dots, I think that's okay to string your evidence together. You just have to make sure your notes are clear and concise, and that somebody could understand what you want them to look at without you being in the room to explain it. The other thing you can do, and something that we are recommending as a best practice, is on every piece of evidence that you upload for a project, you should highlight the reference ID, the contract reference ID. So whether that's the subcontract number or your task order number, whatever it is, so that GSA can prove that that piece of evidence ties back to your contract, you're going to want to give that a highlight. And in some cases, you might need to highlight things just for continuity, right? So if you've highlighted the company name on every single document, or if you want them to understand that something is provided there just to provide a comprehensive set of records, right? So if you have mods 1 through 3, and you're claiming something on mod 1, and on mod 3, you're claiming something else, right? Like maybe it was 2 labor categories on mod 1, and there's 3 additional labor categories on mod 3, and mod 2's in the middle there, and it didn't talk at all about labor categories because that was a mod for, I don't know, to change the contracting officer, you might include mod 2 just to show the continuity in the whole project, and then you could put that in the note, right? So you could highlight the task order number and say, this is the contract ID, mod 2 provided for continuity or for comprehensive record keeping, something so that they know there's nothing gradable in this document. It's just here so that you have all of the pieces of the puzzle, and we're not keeping anything. Not required in most cases, right? If you, unless they change the guidance and say that you have to include the base and all mods up to what you're claiming or up to the most recent version. But again, there just might be some circumstances where, because of the way that modifications and amendments get written by the prime or by the government agency, you're only getting certain pieces of the puzzle unless you look at all three together. So if you're in that specific situation, you probably know already because we've talked about it. But that would be our recommendation in those cases, is if you have information that's just amplifying text, highlight it and say provided for continuity. It's probably the cleanest thing you can do. Okay, that's all I have. This was my youngest daughter on the first day back to school. She's not in school yet. She still goes to daycare, but her big sister started kindergarten, and she was sad. And actually, this is fantastic timing because I just got a SAM notice. So let's see here. What have they said?
Does not look like they extended it.
They just revised it. So let's see. Yeah. Because why would this timing be any different? Like next GWAC or the next GWAC, I'm moving all my webinars to Wednesdays. This is ridiculous. So yeah.
So Rebecca, while you're looking through that,
yes.
On the template tracking sheet that you had,
yep.
I didn't see where it called out to reference surge support, facility cleared staff, and a few of those items. So we just went in and added those.
Yeah, the additional credit areas. Let me take a look at it. Yeah, because let me see if we're missing that. There might
have been some others too. I don't know if I looked at the newer version. It might have been the original version from a month ago.
Yeah, and I updated it because we also didn't have, like, you should kind of be able to tell what's a federal experience, but it wasn't explicitly called out either. So yeah, I made that change, and if it doesn't include the integrated category areas, I will make sure we update that as well. So that's a good catch, Phil. I'm happy to do that. Okay. So some submission instructions. All right. Additional focus is FAQs. We don't expect any substantial changes to the acquisition strategy. Well, that's good to know. All right. So some things are coming. Yeah, that's really not all that helpful because, guys. All right. Well, I'm going to go shred these Q&A here. I know we've all been waiting with bated breath. And then we'll meet back here tomorrow, or we'll at least have the recording for you for what the major changes in this Q&A are, because it is going to drive some things, I'm sure.
Yeah, the SF30 continuation page document provides more detail of what actually changed.
Awesome. I also love that GSA doesn't send out their emails to everybody on the same schedule. It's probably a system limitation because they can only send so many at a time. But oh man! All right, fantastic. So let's see here. Yeah, Department of State language, sure. Some JV changes. We knew those were coming. By the way, there's been 16 protests on this RFP, and 15 are from the same company. So, oh, they did reduce the FTE hours, by the way. So that went from 1920 to 1912 to recognize the addition of the Juneteenth federal holiday. Okay. Yeah, non-federal projects are not eligible for automatic relevance. Okay, so we kind of knew that, but that's good to have that confirmed. Yeah. some stuff about CPARs, cost price template, CTAs does not apply for us. Yeah, okay. There's going to be some, this is 7 pages on this SF3 here, so, or the SF30 rather, and it's 33 pages of Q&A. So yeah, I'm going to go clear my schedule this afternoon and dig through this, but we will be in touch. And I'm happy to hang on if anybody came to this webinar with questions. I'm happy to talk through anything that you have now. I will go ahead and end the recording at this point.